The scent of sweet osmanthus drifted in through the open window, a cloying sweetness that did little to ease the knot in Mingzhu's stomach. The bustling restaurant, a cacophony of clattering dishes and boisterous laughter, faded to a muted hum in her ears. Tonight, Sioux City glittered with 1,000 lights, a vibrant tapestry of celebration, yet the joy of it felt miles away. Another order for table 5. The shout from the kitchen jolted her back, the mundane reality of her current disguise a stark contrast to the tempest brewing within. She wiped her hands on her apron, the rough fabric a constant reminder of the charade she'd maintained for 3 long years. 3 years of quiet observation, of swallowing her pride, of meticulously weaving the threads of her plan. "Tonight happens to be our 3rd wedding anniversary," she murmured to herself, the words catching in her throat. The irony wasn't lost on her. While other couples celebrated with champagne and roses, she would be serving up a very different kind of surprise. The weight of the delivery bag, filled with steaming dumplings and fragrant noodles, felt strangely symbolic. It grounded her, a tangible link to the life she'd carefully constructed, a life that was about to shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. "After delivering this order, I'll go back and give him a big surprise." Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turbulent emotions churning within. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, each iteration a subtle variation on the theme of revelation. The anticipation was a living thing, coiling in her gut, a mixture of dread and a strange, exhilarating sense of liberation. The delivery to table 5 passed in a blur of polite smiles and murmured thanks. As she turned to leave, a glimpse of her reflection in the polished surface of a nearby table caught her eye. The simple cotton dress, the practical shoes, the hair pulled back in a severe bun, it was a disguise so complete, so utterly convincing, that even she barely recognized herself. For 3 years, she had been a ghost, a shadow flitting through the periphery of her own life. Tonight, the ghost would finally take form. The drive back to the opulent villa, a stark contrast to her humble apartment, felt like a journey through a lifetime. Each streetlight that flashed past was a marker of the time she'd lost, the happiness she'd been denied. The lavish gift she'd meticulously chosen, a limited edition watch that mirrored the one her father wore, now felt heavy with a new significance. It was meant to be a symbol of their shared future, a testament to the love she believed they had. Now, it felt like a cruel joke, a tangible representation of the lies he'd built their marriage upon. As she pulled into the driveway, the villa glowed like a beacon in the night. Music drifted from within, a lively melody that grated on her nerves. He was having a party. Without her. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The surprise, it seemed, was already underway. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed down her dress, a futile attempt to compose herself. The weight of the gift box in her hands felt like a lead weight, dragging her down. This wasn't how she'd envisioned their anniversary. The image of a candlelit dinner, of whispered promises and shared dreams, flickered in her mind, a painful reminder of the life she thought she had. She closed her eyes, steeling herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. Tonight, the mask would come off. The grand entrance hall was filled with people she didn't recognize, their laughter and chatter echoing off the marble floors. Jiang Haoran stood in the center, the picture of a successful businessman, charming and confident. He was holding court, his voice booming with feigned joviality. Beside him stood a woman, elegant and poised, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Shenryu. The name, whispered in hushed tones by her informants, now had a face. A wave of nausea washed over Mingzhu, a visceral reaction to the scene unfolding before her. The carefully constructed facade of normalcy crumbled, leaving behind a raw, gaping wound of betrayal. He hadn't even noticed her yet, his attention fully consumed by the woman at his side. Mingzhu watched them, a detached observer of her own life. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversations, the rhythmic pulse of the music, it all faded into a distant drone. She saw the way Shinryu looked at him, the possessive gleam in her eyes, the subtle touch of her hand on his arm. It was a mirror image of the way she herself had once looked at him, the unspoken language of love and trust. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. "Haren, darling," Shinryu purred, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "The Shin family is delighted with this partnership. Our families united, it's truly a match made in heaven." Jiang Haren beamed, his eyes alight with triumph. "Indeed, Ryu. This is just the beginning of our success." He raised his glass, the gesture encompassing the room, a toast to his newfound prosperity. A prosperity built on lies. On her family's name. On their stolen future. The gift box in Mingju's hands suddenly felt unbearably heavy. The carefully chosen watch, a symbol of their shared dreams, now mocked her with its silent promise. The knot in her stomach tightened, a burning ball of anger replacing the earlier anxiety. The time for subtlety was over. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the celebratory din like a shard of glass. "You seem to have forgotten something, Jiang Haren." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, the humble delivery woman standing in the doorway, her face now illuminated by the harsh glare of the chandelier. Jiang Haren's smile faltered, his eyes widening in recognition. A flicker of fear crossed his face, quickly masked by a veneer of confusion. "Mingju? What are you doing here?" His voice was strained, his gaze darting nervously toward Shinryu. Mingju met his gaze, her own eyes burning with a cold fire. "I believe you owe me an explanation, husband." The emphasis on the word husband hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. The game had begun. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished marble steps of the opulent Sioux City restaurant. Jiang Haren knelt, a velvet box open in his hand, his face a carefully constructed mask of devotion. Shinryu, radiant in a designer dress, her lips curved in a triumphant smile, looked down at him, a delicate hand fluttering near her perfectly made-up face. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring appreciatively, captivated by the spectacle. Haren's carefully rehearsed words echoed in the air, each syllable laced with practiced sincerity. "Ryu," he began, his voice a touch thick with manufactured emotion, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He held his breath, a tremor of something that wasn't quite anticipation, but rather a nervous twitch, ran through him. He needed this to work. He needed Shinryu, needed the Shin family's influence, needed the gilded cage they offered more than he'd ever admitted, even to himself. Across the street, amidst the throng of pedestrians and the rumble of traffic, Mingju stopped dead. Her bicycle, laden with takeout containers, swayed precariously. The insulated bag, normally warm with the scent of steamed dumplings and spicy noodles, suddenly felt like a lead weight against her leg. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating tightness in her chest. She blinked, her eyes fixed on the scene unfolding across the street, the world around her blurring into a hazy backdrop. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't be. She had convinced herself, foolishly, that the late nights and hushed phone calls were just business. Important business. Not this. Never this. A cold dread seeped through her, chilling her from the inside out. She pushed the bicycle forward, her movements jerky and uncontrolled. The scent of expensive perfume, the click of designer heels on the pavement, the murmur of the crowd, all assaulted her senses as she approached. Her throat felt tight, her voice caught somewhere between a sob and a scream. "Who is that woman?" The words were barely a whisper, choked by the rising tide of emotion. "Are you proposing to her?" Haren's head snapped up, his carefully crafted expression shattering like thin ice. His eyes, usually so full of charming confidence, widened in a mixture of shock and fear. He hadn't expected this. Not here. Not now. His carefully laid plans, the meticulously constructed lies, threatened to unravel before his very eyes. Shinryu's perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed in annoyance. "Who is this person?" she demanded, her voice dripping with disdain. Her gaze swept over Mingju's simple clothes, the worn bicycle, the takeout bag. "You stinky delivery guy, take out and get out." Her words, sharp as shards of glass, cut through the stunned silence. Before Haran could stammer out a response, a woman, elegantly dressed and dripping with diamonds, pushed her way through the crowd. "Mingju, I warn you, don't ruin my brother's good deeds." Haran's mother, her face contorted in a mask of fury, glared at Mingju with open contempt. The humiliation, the sheer audacity of this interruption, burned in her gut. This delivery girl, daring to disrupt such an important occasion. Mingju's grip tightened on the handlebars of her bicycle. The insulated bag, now a symbol of her naive trust, dug into her side. Her initial shock had given way to a burning rage, a cold fire that licked at the edges of her control. The whispers of the crowd, their curious stares, fueled the flames. This wasn't just about Haran's betrayal. This was about the years she'd spent swallowing her pride, silencing her own needs, for a man who clearly didn't deserve her loyalty. For a family who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience, a stain on their meticulously crafted image. She took a deep breath, the air sharp and cold in her lungs. "Good deeds," she repeated, her voice trembling but gaining strength with each word. The crowd hushed, sensing the shift in the air, the gathering storm in her eyes. "Marrying another woman while still married to me? Is that what you consider a good deed?" Haran scrambled to his feet, his face pale and drawn. "Mingju, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his voice cracking with desperation. He glanced at Shinryu, then back at his mother, his eyes pleading for help, for a way out of this unfolding disaster. "Oh, really?" Mingju's voice, now steady and clear, cut through his feeble excuses. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on his. "Then what exactly does it look like, Haran? Because to me, it looks like you've been lying to me. Lying to everyone." Each word was a precise strike, aimed at the heart of his carefully constructed facade. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer another flimsy excuse, but the words caught in his throat. He couldn't lie his way out of this. Not anymore. The truth, stark and undeniable, hung heavy in the air. Mingju's eyes, usually soft and yielding, now blazed with an intensity he'd never seen before. He'd underestimated her. He'd seen her quiet strength as weakness, her gentle nature as a sign of submission. He'd been wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. The crowd, now silent and captivated, watched the scene unfold. The whispers, the curious glances, had intensified, fueled by the raw emotion radiating from Mingju. She stood there, a seemingly ordinary woman in simple clothes, yet her presence commanded attention, her voice resonating with a power that belied her appearance. She was no longer just a delivery woman, a nameless face in the crowd. She was a force to be reckoned with. And Jiang Haoran, caught in the crosshairs of her fury, was about to learn just how powerful that force could be. The opulent chandelier cast a shimmering, almost mocking light on the pristine white tablecloth, the remnants of an unfinished meal a stark reminder of the shattered facade of normalcy. The air, thick with the scent of expensive wine and simmering resentment, crackled with unspoken accusations. Mingju felt a strange detachment, as if observing the scene from a distance, her own body a mere vessel carrying the storm within. Ryu's mother, a woman draped in jade and diamonds, surveyed Mingju with a thinly veiled disdain. "My daughter, Ryu, is the apple of the Shin family's eye. Educated abroad, accomplished, and poised to inherit a significant portion of her family's business empire. She deserves a husband of equal standing, not this." The dismissive wave of her hand encompassed not only Haran but Mingzhu herself, a silent judgment that cut deeper than any spoken insult. They think I'm nothing, Mingzhu thought, the familiar sting of insignificance momentarily eclipsing the cold fury that had been building within her. They see the delivery uniform, the worn bag, the calloused hands, and they think they know me. A bitter smile touched her lips. They had no idea. And what exactly is this supposed to mean? Mingzhu's voice, though quiet, carried a surprising weight, silencing the whispers that had begun to circulate around the table. Her gaze, steady and unwavering, met Ruyu's mother's. Are you implying that my brother isn't good enough for your daughter? Di Mingze, his face a mask of controlled anger, leaned forward, his protective instincts flaring. The subtle shift in the room's dynamics was palpable, the Di family closing ranks, a silent threat radiating from their collective presence. Ruyu's mother, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected defiance, recovered quickly. Of course, it's because you don't deserve my brother, Ryu interjected, her voice dripping with condescension. Everyone knows you trapped Haran into this ridiculous marriage. 3 years you've been hiding, leeching off him, pretending to be some commoner. The word hung in the air, laced with venom. Mingzhu's fingers tightened around the stem of her water glass, the cool crystal a stark contrast to the burning rage that coursed through her veins. Leeching. Trapped. The accusations echoed the whispers she had endured for years, the constant reminders of her perceived inadequacy. They judge me without knowing the truth, without understanding the sacrifices I made. I didn't eat and drink for free, Mingzhu stated, her voice calm despite the turmoil within. Each word was carefully measured, each syllable a small victory against the suffocating pressure of their judgment. I paid for it. With my own delivery job. The admission, meant to shame her, instead hung in the air like a challenge. The D siblings exchanged glances, a mixture of pride and concern flickering in their eyes. They knew the truth, the sacrifices she had made to protect their family, the burden she had carried in silence. Haran, pale and sweating, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The bravado he had displayed earlier had evaporated, replaced by a desperate plea for escape. His mother, a woman whose sharp features and expensive jewelry screamed ambition, slammed her hand on the table. The sound reverberated through the room, silencing all conversation. Divorce my son immediately. Her voice, sharp and brittle, left no room for argument. This charade has gone on long enough. Sign the papers, and we'll consider this unfortunate incident closed. She pushed a folder across the table, the pristine white pages mocking Mingzhu's worn hands. The room held its breath, waiting for Mingzhu's reaction. She looked down at the divorce papers, the legal jargon blurring into meaningless symbols. Divorce. The word echoed in her mind, a hollow sound that resonated with the emptiness she had felt for so long. 3 years. 3 years of stolen moments, of whispered promises, of a love she had believed to be real. She thought of the sacrifices she had made, the life she had willingly given up, the family she had yearned to embrace. And for what? For a man who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone, a means to an end. A wave of nausea washed over her, the suffocating weight of betrayal crushing her spirit. But beneath the pain, a flicker of defiance ignited. No. The word formed silently in her mind, a small act of rebellion against the expectations, the judgments, the suffocating web of lies that had ensnared her for so long. She slowly raised her head, her gaze sweeping across the faces surrounding her. Haran's pleading eyes, his mother's triumphant sneer, Ryu's smug satisfaction. And then, her family. Her brothers, their faces etched with concern and unwavering support. It was in their eyes that she found the strength she needed, the courage to finally break free. She reached out, not for the pen, but for the glass of water, her fingers steady despite the tremor that ran through her body. She took a slow, deliberate sip, the cool liquid a balm against the burning anger that threatened to consume her. Then, she set the glass down, the delicate clink echoing in the sudden silence. She wouldn't sign. Not yet. The game was far from over. The air in the opulent restaurant hung thick with unspoken words, the scent of expensive wine battling with the metallic tang of fear. Jiang Haoran's face, moments ago flushed with triumph, now paled to the color of old bone. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room, a suffocating pressure against his chest. How could this be happening? He thought, the words a desperate whisper in his mind. She was nothing. A delivery girl. A nobody. He'd calculated everything, planned every detail. This wasn't part of the script. Shenryu watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of unease. The triumphant smirk she'd worn just moments before had melted away, replaced by a thin line of apprehension. Her carefully manicured fingers tightened around her champagne flute, the delicate glass threatening to shatter under the pressure. This wasn't the assured, powerful Jiang Haoran she'd agreed to partner with. This man looked cornered, desperate. Her gaze darted towards Mingzhu, the woman who stood at the center of the storm, an unsettling calmness radiating from her. Mingzhu met Ryu's gaze, a flicker of something akin to pity crossing her face. You thought you were playing a game of power, she thought, her voice a cold whisper in the recesses of her mind. But you're just a pawn, like him. She allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to play on her lips. The silence stretched, thin and taut, each second amplifying the tension. Huasian. Jiang Haoran finally choked out, the name a desperate plea for normalcy, for the world to right itself. The name reverberated through the room, a low hum of anticipation replacing the stunned silence. All eyes turned towards the entrance, where a figure stood framed against the soft glow of the evening lights. Huasian, fourth Master Hua, his presence alone a declaration of power. He moved with an almost predatory grace, his gaze sharp and assessing, settling finally on Mingzhu. There was a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, a spark of recognition that sent a shiver down her spine. Mingzhu, you are presumptuous, Haoran spat, the words laced with a venom he no longer had the power to wield. He needed to regain control, to reassert his dominance. He couldn't let this delivery girl ruin everything. Mingzhu didn't even glance at him. Her eyes remained fixed on Huasian, a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling within her. He's here. It's really happening. She felt a tremor run through her, a strange blend of fear and excitement. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, planning for, dreading. The moment of truth. Huasian's gaze swept over the assembled guests, his silence amplifying the tension. He stopped at Jiang Haoran, his expression unreadable. If you don't talk, no one will treat you as dumb, he stated, his voice smooth, yet carrying an undercurrent of steel. The words, though seemingly innocuous, hung in the air like a threat. Haoran flinched. He wanted to shout, to deny, to rage against the injustice of it all. But the words caught in his throat, strangled by fear. He could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet, the carefully constructed facade of his life crumbling around him. Suddenly, the restaurant doors swung open again, this time revealing a group of individuals whose arrival caused a ripple of murmurs to spread through the room. Mingzhu's family. Her two older brothers, their faces grim, their eyes radiating a cold fury. Her mother, her elegant composure barely concealing a simmering rage. They moved with an air of authority, their presence immediately shifting the balance of power in the room. Mingzhu, her eldest brother addressed her, his voice a low rumble, filled with concern and protectiveness. He reached out, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent gesture of support. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. The whispers intensified, the air crackling with anticipation. Jiang Haoran stared at the newcomers, his eyes wide with disbelief. How? Why? He couldn't comprehend it. This wasn't possible. Mingzhu met her brother's gaze, a flicker of warmth replacing the icy composure she'd maintained. It's all right now, she thought, the words a silent reassurance. They're here. She straightened her spine, drawing strength from their presence. Huasyan watched the scene unfold, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. This was more interesting than he'd anticipated. He'd been tasked by Mingzhu's father, a man he respected, to ensure the smooth execution of this charade, this elaborate unveiling of a hidden daughter. He hadn't expected to be quite so captivated. He addressed the room, his voice commanding attention. Allow me to introduce Di Mingzhu, eldest daughter of the Di family, rightful heir to the Di fortune. His words were clear, concise, leaving no room for doubt. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Shenruyu's face drained of all color. The carefully constructed image of Jiang Haoran, the successful entrepreneur, shattered into a million pieces. He was nothing. A fraud. A pawn in a game he hadn't even realized he was playing. Mingzhu's mother stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a righteous fury. She addressed Jiang Haoran, her voice laced with contempt. You thought you could deceive us? You thought you could steal what rightfully belongs to my daughter? Haoran opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but no sound came out. He felt a cold dread creeping up his spine, a chilling premonition of the consequences he was about to face. He looked at Mingzhu, her face now devoid of any trace of the meek delivery girl he thought he knew. In her place stood a woman of power, of strength, of unwavering resolve. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated them all. The Di family moved with a swift, coordinated precision, their actions a carefully orchestrated dance of power and retribution. The contracts were declared void, the partnerships dissolved. Jiang Haoran's carefully constructed empire crumbled around him, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. The humiliation was complete, absolute. He had lost everything. As the chaos subsided, Mingzhu stood beside her family, her gaze sweeping over the wreckage of Jiang Haoran's ambition. A faint smile played on her lips, a smile that held no trace of malice, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served. She had reclaimed her name, her identity, her destiny. And in the process, she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The opulent restaurant, a jewel box of Sioux City's nightlife, shimmered with the reflected light of 1,000 crystals. Earlier that day, this very space had witnessed the charade of Jiang Haoran's supposed triumph. Now, hours later, the air hung heavy with a different kind of tension. Di Mingzhu sat alone, a single figure at a table draped in white linen, the remnants of a celebratory feast untouched before her. The lingering scent of expensive wine, a mockery of the earlier toasts, mingled with the subtle aroma of her jasmine tea. She traced the rim of her delicate porcelain cup, the coolness a stark contrast to the fire churning in her gut. Tonight, this gilded cage would be Jiang Haoran's undoing. He had played his part flawlessly, the ambitious young entrepreneur basking in the glow of his impending partnership with the Shen family. He had not even spared her a glance, his eyes glued to Shenruyu, their whispered conversations a sickening symphony of ambition and betrayal. She had watched it all, the mask of the meek delivery woman firmly in place, her heart a cold, hard stone. Each forced smile, every subservient gesture, had been a calculated move in her game of revenge. Now, the pieces were in place. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped her from her reverie. Huasyan. Fourth Master Hua. A man whose power radiated like an invisible force field. She had heard whispers of him, legends woven around his ruthlessness and his uncanny ability to predict market trends. He was a predator, she knew, but tonight, she would be the one setting the trap. He settled across from her, his gaze unwavering. Di Mingzhu, he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble that echoed the quiet power he exuded. The name, her true name, spoken aloud by him sent a shiver down her spine. It had been so long since she had heard it uttered without disdain, without the veiled contempt of her supposed in-laws. "Fourth Master Hua," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor of anticipation that ran through her. "I believe we have business to discuss." Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained an impassive mask. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, visualizing his reactions, calculating her words like a seasoned gambler placing her final bet. Hua Xian raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his dark eyes. "Indeed. Your brothers have made your situation abundantly clear." "My husband's deceit," Mingzhu corrected, her voice laced with ice, "is not merely a personal matter. It touches upon the honor of the Di family. The Jiang family's presumption will not go unanswered." Her fingers tightened around her teacup, the delicate porcelain threatening to crack under the pressure. Beneath the table, her leg bounced with barely contained energy. He leaned back, studying her with a predatory intensity that would have unnerved a lesser woman. Mingzhu held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "And what, pray tell, do you propose?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement, fourth master," she said, her voice regaining its smooth composure. "If Master Hua helps me dismantle the Jiang family, I will ensure that my brothers prioritize their business dealings with you." A slow smile spread across Hua Xian's face, revealing a hint of sharp teeth. "You're offering me the Di family's favor in exchange for what, precisely?" "Justice," Mingzhu stated, the word a sharp crack in the hushed atmosphere. She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I want the Jiang family ruined. Publicly. Completely." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken understanding. Hua Xian considered her, his expression unreadable. Mingzhu fought the urge to fidget, the weight of his scrutiny almost physical. She reminded herself of the years she had spent playing the role of the invisible wife, the disregarded daughter-in-law. Years of swallowed anger, of carefully banked resentment. Years that had forged her into the woman she was now, a woman capable of playing this dangerous game. "Interesting," he finally murmured, his voice a low growl. "And what about your husband?" "He will get what he deserves," Mingzhu replied, her voice devoid of emotion. The image of Jiang Haren's smug face flashed before her eyes, fueling the cold fire in her belly. "Divorce. And you marry me." The words hung in the air, a stark declaration of intent. Hua Xian's eyebrows rose in surprise, a genuine flicker of astonishment crossing his features for the first time. "Marry you?" he echoed, a hint of amusement creeping back into his voice. "Yes," Mingzhu affirmed, her voice unwavering. The thought of being tied to this man, even in a strategic alliance, sent a wave of revulsion through her. But it was a necessary sacrifice. Marriage to Hua Xian, with all his power and influence, would be the ultimate shield against any future attempts by the Jiang family to reclaim their perceived prize. It would also be a powerful symbol of her own resilience, her triumph over their calculated betrayal. He regarded her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, a predatory gleam in his gaze. "Very well, Di Mingzhu," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I accept your proposal." The unspoken agreement hung heavy in the air, a pact sealed in the heart of Sioux City's glittering night. The jasmine tea had grown cold, but the fire in Mingzhu's chest burned hotter than ever. The game had begun. The crisp morning air of Sioux City held a deceptive tranquility. Sunlight glinted off the skyscrapers, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the Di family mansion. A flurry of activity massed an almost chilling precision, each servant moving with the practiced grace of a dancer in a meticulously choreographed ballet. The air hummed with the low thrum of anticipation, an electric current running beneath the surface of polite smiles and hushed instructions. Madame D, her face a mask of serene composure, oversaw the preparations with an eagle eye. The lavish decorations, the meticulously chosen floral arrangements, the endless stream of delicacies being prepared, every detail screamed of the D family's power and influence, a silent declaration of their unwavering dominance. Everything must be perfect, Madame D murmured, her voice low and resonant, each word carrying the weight of unspoken expectations. Her gaze drifted towards a framed photograph of Mingzhu, a younger, more carefree Mingzhu, her eyes sparkling with an innocence that had been carefully guarded, nurtured, even weaponized. A flicker of pain crossed Madame D's face, quickly replaced by a steely resolve. My daughter deserves nothing less. Across town, in a modest apartment, Jiang Haran paced like a caged animal. The news of yesterday's events had spread like wildfire, each whispered rumor tightening the noose around his neck. He replayed the scene in his mind, Mingzhu's voice, calm yet laced with steel, echoing in his ears. How could he have been so blind? He'd seen her vulnerability, her quiet demeanor, and mistaken it for weakness. He had underestimated her, a fatal error that was now unraveling his carefully constructed world. He'd envisioned a life of luxury, of effortless ascension to the upper echelons of society, all facilitated by his marriage to the seemingly unassuming Mingzhu. Now, the gilded cage he had so eagerly sought was about to become his prison. A cold dread seeped into his bones, the chilling premonition of his impending downfall. The scene shifted to a memory, a clandestine meeting in the opulent study of the D family patriarch 3 years prior. Haran, the old man had said, his voice a low rumble, my daughter, Mingzhu, she needs protection. A husband who will cherish her, not her family's wealth. Haran, blinded by ambition, had readily agreed, the words of feigned devotion flowing effortlessly from his lips. The patriarch's eyes, however, had held a knowing glint, a silent understanding that went unspoken. The memory dissolved, leaving Haran with the bitter taste of regret. He had been a pawn in a game far bigger than he could comprehend. The evening descended upon Jing City, casting long shadows across the sprawling D estate. The grand ballroom buzzed with the hushed whispers of the city's elite. Shen Ruyu, resplendent in a designer gown, surveyed the scene with an air of haughty indifference. Her gaze flickered towards Jiang Haran, a barely perceptible sneer curling her lip. He looked disheveled, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable unease. He's unraveling, she thought, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. Their partnership, their planned marriage, it was all crumbling before her eyes, and she felt a strange sense of detached satisfaction. He had used Mingzhu, and now, he was being used in return. Suddenly, the music stopped. A hush fell over the room, every eye turning towards the entrance. Mingzhu stood there, radiant in a simple yet elegant gown, her demeanor transformed. The quiet delivery woman was gone, replaced by a woman of power, of quiet strength, her eyes blazing with a fiery intensity. Beside her stood her brothers, their faces grim, their presence a silent declaration of support. I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Mingzhu's voice, amplified by the sudden silence, cut through the room. She held up a document, the marriage certificate between herself and Jiang Haran. This, she said, her voice rising, is proof of my marriage to this man, a marriage he conveniently forgot to mention to Miss Shen. Haran's face paled. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer a denial, an explanation, but the words caught in his throat. The room seemed to spin, the whispers turning into a deafening roar. Another flashback, this time to a conversation between Mingzhu and her eldest brother. Are you sure about this, Mimi? He had asked, his voice laced with concern. This charade, it's dangerous. Mingzhu had met his gaze, her own unwavering. It's necessary, she had replied, to expose him, to protect our family. The present returned with a jolt. Mingzhu continued, her voice ringing with conviction. For 3 years, I played the role of the unassuming wife, the oblivious fool. I watched, I listened, I gathered evidence of his deceit, his lies, his betrayal. Her gaze swept across the room, settling on Haren. You thought you were playing me, Jiang Haren? You were merely a pawn in my game. The D family members stepped forward, flanking Mingzhu, their expressions a mixture of anger and pride. The full weight of their power, their influence, pressed down on Haren, suffocating him. He stumbled back, his eyes darting from one accusing face to another. The carefully constructed facade he had maintained for so long crumbled, revealing the coward beneath. And then, a new figure entered the scene. Huasyan, the fourth master Hua, his presence radiating an aura of quiet authority. He walked towards Mingzhu, his gaze unwavering, a hint of admiration in his eyes. Impressive, he murmured, his voice low and resonant. Your father would be proud. Another flashback, this time a phone call between the D patriarch and Huasyan. Ensure everything goes according to plan, the patriarch had instructed, his voice weak but firm. Protect my daughter. Expose the truth. And when the time is right, he paused, introduce yourself. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Huasyan, the seemingly unrelated figure, was the final player in this elaborate game of chess. He had been watching, waiting, orchestrating events from the shadows, ensuring Mingzhu's safety, her triumph. Mingzhu looked at Huasyan, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. The game was over. The truth was out. And she, Di Mingzhu, the once hidden daughter, had emerged victorious. The crystal chandeliers of the D family banquet hall cast a shimmering, almost ethereal glow across the room, reflecting off the polished marble floors and the expectant faces of Jing City's elite. Mingzhu stood at the periphery, the simple delivery uniform a stark contrast to the opulent gowns and tailored suits surrounding her. A faint tremor ran through her hand as she clutched the small, worn leather-bound notebook. Inside lay the meticulously documented proof, the key to unlocking the truth. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of nausea. Tonight, she thought, the word echoing in the hollow spaces of her mind, tonight, everything changes. Jiang Haoran, oblivious to the storm brewing within her, stood beside Shenruyu, his hand resting possessively on her arm. He beamed, basking in the reflected glory of the Shen family's prestige. Mingzhu watched him, a cold, detached observer of her own life. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, was nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion. Each forced smile, each carefully chosen word, was a calculated move in his game of deceit. He thinks he's won, she mused, a flicker of icy resolve hardening her gaze. He has no idea what's coming. The air crackled with anticipation as Shen Baichuan, patriarch of the Shen family, took the stage. He spoke of synergy, of prosperity, of the unbreakable bond that would be forged between the Shen and Jiang enterprises. His words, however, were mere background noise to Mingzhu. Her focus remained fixed on Haoran, on the subtle twitch of his lips, the almost imperceptible sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was nervous. Good. Just as Shen Baichuan reached the climax of his speech, a hush fell over the room. A figure, tall and imposing, emerged from the shadows. He moved with an almost predatory grace, his presence commanding immediate attention. Mingzhu's breath hitched. This was not the man Haoran had introduced as Huasyan. This man's eyes held a depth, a power, that the other lacked. This was the real fourth master Hua. The impostor Huasyan paled, his carefully constructed facade crumbling like dry earth. He stammered, a desperate plea forming on his lips, but the words died in his throat. The real Huasyan fixed him with a glacial stare. You've played your part well, he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through the room. But the charade ends here. Shen Baichuan's face contorted in disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice laced with thinly veiled panic. Huasyan turned to him, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. Huasyan, he gestured towards the trembling impostor, is his illegitimate child. He pointed a finger at Shen Baichuan. Yours. A secret you've guarded jealously for years. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and whispers. Shenryu recoiled from Haran as if he were a viper. The carefully constructed tapestry of lies began to unravel, thread by thread. Mingzhu stepped forward, her voice clear and steady despite the turmoil raging within her. She addressed Haran directly, her words cutting through the chaos like a shard of glass. "You're just a bastard that Shen Baichuan raised outside," she stated, each word dripping with the venom of betrayal. "You married me, a D, to legitimize yourself, to climb the ladder of power." Haran's face was a mask of shock and fury. He opened his mouth to retort, but Mingzhu silenced him with a raised hand. She turned to her family, to her brothers who had always protected her, to her mother whose eyes now shimmered with unshed tears. "Di Mingzhu," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound strength, "is my name. I am the eldest daughter of the Di family, and I will not be silenced." A wave of support surged from her family. Her brothers flanked her, their faces grim, their bodies radiating an aura of protective menace. Her mother stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to cup Mingzhu's face. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "My brave, strong daughter." Huasyan watched the scene unfold, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. He had been observing Mingzhu, intrigued by her resilience, her unwavering determination. He had been a pawn in her father's plan, a silent observer, but now, he found himself drawn to her, captivated by her spirit. He addressed the room, his voice cutting through the lingering whispers. "Di Mingzhu," he stated, his gaze locking with hers, "is my daughter-in-law." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room turned to them, disbelief etched on every face. Haran's world imploded. The carefully constructed edifice of his lies crumbled around him, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and utterly ruined. Shen Baichuan's face was ashen, his carefully cultivated image shattered beyond repair. Mingzhu met Huasyan's gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between them. This was not part of the plan, but in that moment, she realized it was the only way. It was the final, decisive blow that would secure her freedom, her family's honor, and the downfall of those who had sought to destroy them. Turning to the devastated Haran and the equally ruined Shen family, Huasyan's voice was a chilling whisper. "You are finished." The opulent Di family banquet hall shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, the remnants of the earlier chaos replaced by a fragile quiet. The air, thick with the scent of expensive wine and lingering tension, vibrated with the aftermath. Mingzhu stood amidst the glittering debris of her former life, a phantom ache in her chest where the weight of Jiang Haran's betrayal had once resided. She looked at the faces of her family, their expressions a mixture of relief, pride, and a touch of awe. They saw her differently now, not as the meek delivery woman, but as the Di Mingzhu they had lost and found again. A small, self-deprecating smile touched her lips. She hadn't known how much she had craved this acknowledgement, this belonging, until it was almost snatched away. The aftermath of the revelation had been swift and brutal. Jiang Haoran, stripped bare of his fabricated persona, stammered and pleaded, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Shenryu, her haughty composure shattered, retreated with a venomous glare, her dreams of a prestigious alliance dissolving into dust. The Di family, a force to be reckoned with, moved with a chilling efficiency. Their lawyers, summoned with a single phone call, descended like vultures, ensuring that justice, swift and merciless, was served. Mingzhu watched it all unfold with a detached calmness, the fiery anger that had consumed her earlier replaced by a weary acceptance. She hadn't anticipated this. Her plan, meticulously crafted over months, had been to simply expose Jiang Haoren's lies. She hadn't foreseen the cascade of events that followed, the resurgence of her family's protective instincts, the complete dismantling of Haoren's carefully constructed facade. A part of her, the part that still clung to the vestiges of the love she had once felt for him, felt a flicker of pity. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his deceit, the calculated way he had used her, the cold indifference in his eyes when he thought she was powerless. The banquet hall slowly emptied, leaving only the immediate D family and a few trusted advisors. Her mother, her eyes red-rimmed but filled with a fierce maternal pride, embraced her tightly, whispering words of comfort and reassurance. Her brothers, their initial disbelief replaced by a protective fury, patted her shoulder, their silent support a comforting presence. It was in that moment, surrounded by the unwavering love of her family, that Mingzhu felt the last shards of her broken heart begin to mend. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, a figure she hadn't noticed before. Fourth Master Hua, his presence as imposing as ever, approached her with a measured stride. His eyes, usually veiled with an enigmatic aloofness, held a flicker of something. Was it admiration? He had witnessed the entire spectacle, the transformation of the quiet, unassuming delivery woman into the formidable Di Mingzhu. A faint smile played on his lips, a rare sight that sent a ripple of surprise through the room. Di Mingzhu, he began, his voice a low rumble that resonated in the now quiet hall. Mingzhu met his gaze, her heart beating a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. She had heard whispers about Huasyan, his power, his influence, his enigmatic nature. He was a man shrouded in mystery, a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. What could he possibly want with her? He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. The silence stretched, taut with anticipation. Mingzhu's brothers exchanged uneasy glances, their protective instincts on high alert. Even her mother, usually unflappable, held her breath. Then, he spoke, his voice clear and resonant, each word echoing in the vastness of the hall. Di Mingzhu, he repeated, his gaze unwavering. Will you marry me? The question hung in the air, a tangible entity that vibrated with the weight of its implications. Mingzhu's mind raced. Marriage? To Huasyan? It was unexpected, improbable, almost absurd. She had just escaped one ill-fated marriage, and the thought of entering another, especially with a man as powerful and enigmatic as Huasyan, filled her with a mixture of trepidation and intrigue. She glanced at her family, their faces a mixture of shock and bewilderment. Her mother's eyes widened, her brother's jaws dropped. No one, not even in their wildest imaginations, could have predicted this. Mingzhu closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady her racing thoughts. She had spent her life being manipulated, controlled, and underestimated. She had clawed her way back from the depths of despair, reclaiming her identity, her dignity, her rightful place. Now, she was being offered a chance at a new beginning, a chance to forge her own destiny. She opened her eyes, her gaze meeting Huasyan's unwavering stare. She saw something in his eyes, a depth, a strength, a hint of vulnerability that resonated with her own experiences. He wasn't offering her a gilded cage, she realized. He was offering her a partnership, an alliance. He was offering her a chance to stand beside him, not behind him. A slow smile spread across her lips, a smile that reached her eyes, reflecting the newfound strength and confidence that bloomed within her. She looked at Huasyan, her voice clear and steady, echoing the resolve that had carried her through the storm. Let's get married. The words hung in the air, sealing their fate, marking the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with uncertainty, with challenges, but also with the promise of something real. Something powerful. Something inevitable. A faint smile played on Huasyan's lips, a silent acknowledgement.